Welcome to the Jones Gallery Lecture Series. I'm Sarah Jones, the curator at Jones Gallery. We're a contemporary art gallery in St. John, New Brunswick. Our core mandate is to present work by contemporary Canadian artists, but art education is also important to us, and we think that art history should be accessible, understandable, and free. That's why we hold public lectures at the gallery and produce videos like this one. To keep this series free and open, we rely on the donations of our viewers. If you would like to support our efforts, please donate at jonesgallery.ca/arthistory, and the link is below in the notes. Today I'll be discussing Caravaggio's Calling of Matthew that he created around 1600. This is for the Contarelli Chapel. He created a series of 3 paintings for the Contarelli Chapel, but I'll be focusing specifically on this one today. This is a very important commission for Caravaggio. It was the Calling of Matthew, and the Matthew cycle that he created for the Contarelli Chapel. Here, let's move on. Let's take a look. Okay, so here's the Contarelli Chapel. This is in San Luigi dei Francesi in Rome, which is a church just around the corner from the Piazza Navona. It's easy to find, and kind of all the way down and to the left, there's a chapel kind of off the side of the nave, and Caravaggio, like I said, did 3 paintings for this chapel. The one I'm discussing today is on the left, so you can't. So the people there that are over to the right, like you kind of lean in and you look over to the left, and the Calling of Matthew is there, and the altarpiece is the Inspiration of Matthew. And then on the right, there's a painting called the Martyrdom of Matthew. And Caravaggio was floating around Rome for in his early life, and he was receiving a few commissions and had some success. So doing relatively well. He came to the attention of Cardinal Francesco Maria del Monte, this gentleman here, who purchased a couple of his works, but then also kind of absorbed Caravaggio into his household and put Caravaggio, we believe, forward for the commission at the Contarelli Chapel here. And Caravaggio started with the painting on the right. So in size, you can't quite see it here, but it's into the right there, the Martyrdom of Matthew. And then he did the one that we're looking at today, and then came back to do the altarpiece. And when he unveiled these paintings, like these were some of his first large scale religious works, for which that kind of genre would kind of propel him into fame and success, and so these were the first really to catapult him into that kind of artistic stratosphere. So let's look closely at the Calling of Matthew. This is a story from of course the Gospels. It's in kind of a version of it appears in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. And the story, the bare bones of the story is essentially Jesus is calling his newest disciple, who is Levi, who becomes Matthew. And the story in the Bible is that Matthew, Levi, is a tax collector, and that he leaves that life to then become a disciple of Christ. So we have that story of the moment of summoning here that has been condensed into a relief-like narrative, and all of the important information is conveyed in this one scene. So on the right we have Christ, identified by he has a thin halo, and his arm is outstretched, his right arm. And he's kind of languidly pointing, and that gesture is echoed by Peter. That's his disciple Peter, blocking almost the entire body of Christ, and he is also gesturing. And there are 5 individuals seated at a table. We read this as a very kind of sparse customs house or tax collection house. And you can see the 2 figures on the far left counting out some coins on the table. There are 2 younger men in the very center, kind of turning in their seats towards Christ and Peter. And then that figure with the beard, the kind of the long hair and the black hat, that is Matthew. And you can see that he is gesturing to himself. And what's interesting about this painting is that everything, the entire narrative about who is being called and who is being summoned is all established by the composition and the staging. So look at the echoing of the gesture. So Christ is making is lifting his finger, which is echoed by Peter, which is then echoed by Matthew. There is light pouring in from a window above that we can't see, flowing in from the right to the left. And notice that the light is falling full on the face of the 2 young men as well as Matthew. And so we read the light also as a metaphor, that the light is coming not directly from Christ. So we don't have kind of beams of light issuing from his fingers or from his face, but the compositional light, the light of the window, we're reading that as divine light. And so the way that the painting is structured, we can understand the narrative. Here's a few details to show you. So the light comes pouring in from behind Christ. It just picks up his halo and accentuates his hand. So lights up that all important gesture. And Caravaggio was known for remarkable use of something called chiaroscuro, which is light and dark in Italian. And so it's the accentuation of deep shadow and very particular kinds of light. So a great example of that is that figure of Christ. So Christ is essentially the most important, well, I would say maybe the second most important figure in this scene, because Matthew is, of course, the most important, but we need Christ for this narrative to make any sense. But generally in composition, so say in paintings from the 1400s or the 1500s, Christ would be in the center, he would be in full light. But here, Caravaggio has pushed him back into the shadows. And you can see look at the hand that's completely almost shrouded in darkness. It's almost easy to I don't even know if you'd be able to see that really if you were in person looking at this painting. And the way that the light comes from behind him, so his body is in shadow, but it just picks up enough that we can see his face and his nose. But then look at the deepness, the kind of the shadow that's enveloping his forehead and his hair. The face of Peter is completely in darkness as well, but it's lighting up the most important part, which is that gesture. Also comparing the 2 youthful figures, or the more youthful figures in the center of this composition, they're turning towards Christ and Peter, and you can see that the light is falling fully on their faces, and we read that they are turning away from the money, kind of the temptation of the material world, and they are turning to Christ. So again, kind of a message about divine light, compared to the figures on the far left, whose faces are more in shadow. They haven't noticed yet the presence of Christ and Peter. Whereas as Levi/Matthew has the light, like on the face of the young men, the light is fully enveloping his face, and then he makes that gesture again, that humi gesture. Yeah. But you can again contrasting the figures on the left, like not being open to the divine message, and they're absorbed with the counting of coins. And then Matthew and the 2 younger figures are beginning to turn away from that life. Notice too how Christ and Peter are in more or less timeless robes and garb. So we read them as antique figures, whereas the figures around the table would have been, this is how Romans or Florentines would have dressed around 1600. So they're of our world, and Christ and Peter are of a different world. And also typical of Caravaggio, which I think you'll see, we have a few videos on him to share with you, but I think you'll see this over and over again. It's always a very Spartan interior. So we only have, in this case, one window in the center right, and everything else there's a bit of a wall we can see on the left. There's this table and a bench, but it's the narrative is always with Caravaggio is reduced to its most essential elements, and everything else is stripped away. And that's part of the Baroque idea that it's about a foregrounding of the essential messaging, and anything that's distracting or that could take away from understanding the message is pulled away and reduced. Thank you for watching, and how you can support the lecture series, again, is by donating at jonesgallery.ca/arthistory. I'm Sarah Jones, technical support today by Caleb Jones, and thank you for watching.